Ontario is a huge province, and most of it is north of the French River. For transportation infrastructure, that means long distances and complex needs. For federal parties in this election, does it make for defining platform ideas? Let's find out from Charles Cirtwill. He is the president and CEO of the Northern Policy Institute, who joins us from our studio at Confederation College in Thunder Bay. And Charles, it's always good to have you on TVO. How are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. I want to just put a couple of figures on the table here, which will shock some people, I suspect, who don't know. Northern Ontario actually makes up 88% of the province's landmass, but it is home to only 5% of Ontario's population. So that's basically a little less than 800,000 people spread over 800,000 square kilometers. What kind of challenges does that pose when you're trying to design transportation infrastructure?
So when you look at that distribution, you're talking about mass transit issues. You're talking about whether you've got road infrastructure. You know, if you look in northwestern Ontario, for example, we've got a lot of roads that head sort of north and in the middle of the bush and don't connect to each other.
And therefore?
So it ends up with a challenge. So you've got an exercise where basically your only way out is to turn around and come back. So if a tree falls down on a power line, that's it, you're done. You take a look at the challenges we had around community Niskandaga 3 weeks ago. They lost the pump in their water system. Took almost 3 months to get a new one because, simply put, there is no way to get there from here.
Well, I think most of us remember well what happened when the bridge went out over the Nipigon River north of Thunder Bay. Fill in the blanks. What did that mean for people living in the area?
So not just for people living in the area, we're talking about that's literally the only point at which the country can be broken in half. Once that bridge was out, there was no way for road transportation to get through. So you had issues around just-in-time delivery to Canadian Tires, to restaurants, to hotels, and not just in the local jurisdictions. You also had impacts in Winnipeg, and you had impacts on your end because, of course, trucks have to go back and forth across that one bridge. Now, the good news is there's 4 lanes there now instead of 2, so if we break one, we'll still have 2 lanes left to make things work.
Gotcha. I want to have our director, Sheldon Osmond, and his wonderful technical team in there bring up the following map showing the highway expansion priorities in the north, and I'll read this in some detail for those who can't see the map but are listening on podcast. Here are sort of the 4 areas that you've identified as transportation priorities for the north. Twinning Highway 69 between Parry Sound and Sudbury, twinning Highway 17 between Kenora and the Manitoba border, and piloting a so-called 2+1 configuration for Highway 11, that's Barrie to Thunder Bay, plus all-season roads for First Nations. Those are the 4 things that you've got on your hit list. How come those 4?
So a couple of things. When you take a look at, for example, the connection between Kenora and Manitoba and between Sudbury and Southern Ontario, that really is about economic accessibility. That's about the connections between people who have money, jobs, education, healthcare, and the ability to get there. So there's something called a gravity model that looks at the ability to move between 2 communities of certain sizes, and so with right now between Kenora and say the city of Winnipeg, it's literally a 2-lane road, winding 2-lane road that goes for about 300 kilometers. You turn that into a twinned highway that's safer, accessible, higher speed, easier to move transports and goods on, and you end up with a much better, much richer economic connection between Winnipeg and that region. What we did here in Northern Ontario is we set aside that money, three federal governments ago, 3 federal governments and 3 provincial governments ago. And then we decided about a decade ago that maybe it would be more interesting to twin between, or some sections of it between Thunder Bay and a community called Nipigon. And of course, that had great benefits for the community in Nipigon. It's had some positive impacts for Thunder Bay. But in terms of overall value, connecting into that larger center, whether it's Winnipeg to the west or Barrie and Toronto to the south, really has a huge impact for the region and will be much more return on an investment than Ontario and federal taxpayers would have received up till now.
Well, to that end, Charles, what I'd like to do now is sort of go through the 4 major party platforms and see what they have on offer, and then just get your basic sense about whether this is sort of a plus or a minus for Northern Ontario. Let's start, of course, with the Liberal Party. They were the government in the last House of Commons. The Liberal Party Transportation Infrastructure Investment List looks like this. They have suggested that of the more than 2,200 projects that the Liberals say were approved in Ontario over the past 4 years, among them were 61 road and highway projects. A couple included $120 million for the Highway 69 expansion in Parry Sound, $37 million for the expansion of Highway 11 and 17 in Dorium. And you put those on your priority list. The Liberals say the funding has been allocated. So if it's what you want and the money is there, where are things at right now?
So in the Parry Sound side of things, that construction's been going on now for almost 8 or 9 years, ever so slowly. You can't build the entire connection in a day. And you're right. The Liberals' position is that they're happy with the priorities they've had over the last 4, and they want to continue to move forward with them. And from the perspective of marginal investments, incremental improvements, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't have the sense that either the Tories, the Greens, or the NDP would fundamentally abandon those road constructions. My sense is that the other parties want to add on to that. And I suspect you're going to tell us how in the next few minutes.
I am going to do that. But before we get there, for the constitutional wonks among us, I thought roads, bridges, I thought all that stuff was provincial responsibility according to our Constitution. So why is the federal government putting money into that at all anyway?
So the federal government spends money across the board in jurisdictions that belong to municipalities and provinces, and has been quite happy to do it for just about as long as the country has existed. That being said, when you call something the Trans-Canada Highway, you have a certain obligation to put the money forward to pay for it. So that's kind of what happens is you've got infrastructure partnerships between the province and the feds, particularly on Trans-Canada highways. So Highway 11, Highway 17, Highway 400 out of Toronto, those types of things.
Gotcha. Okay, we would love to have been able to say more about the Conservatives. We did reach out to them numerous times to try to get what their priorities for Northern Ontario were. We never got a response from them, but we plucked this off the website, and here's what they say. They pledged to reduce commute times. They pledged to help fund the Ontario Line and the Young Subway Extension projects. And they want to bring back Stephen Harper's Green Public Transit Tax Credit, so that if you spend money taking public transit, you'll get a tax break on that. How much of a difference do you think any of that would make to Northern Ontario?
Frankly, not much at all. We already know, for example, that green transit tax credit, the evidence when we had it the first time around was that it had very little impact on ridership. So in terms of those transportation commitments from the Tories, I'm not particularly impressed by any of them. I think the biggest issue or the biggest item on the Tories partially announced platform so far is this transnational energy corridor that they're talking about. The challenge, of course, there is it's a transformative investment. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. You're talking about right through essentially the far north. So that would have a huge impact in Northern Ontario. But they're calling it an energy corridor, which suggests that the transportation needs of the local communities would be essentially ignored.
Okay, yes, they are calling it an energy corridor, and therefore how has the news of that announcement been received in the region?
Well, I think there's a lot of skepticism. One, it's a massive project. We're talking about basically the transcontinental railroad of the 21st century. And so a lot of people are like, well, $100 billion, you're talking about 100 and some odd individual First Nations communities, you're talking about 5 provinces, a federal government, probably at least 3 terms, 4 terms. Can you really sustain that level of political commitment? And I think all of those are justifiable questions, but we're talking about Canada 2.0 on that front. And I think that we're probably an election or 2 away from having it seriously discussed, but at least the Tories are discussing it this time around.
Andrew Scheer has also said that he would scrap the Liberals' $35 billion Canada Infrastructure Bank. Are there other viable funding alternatives then for big infrastructure projects if that in fact bites the dust in a Scheer government?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes a little bit of sense. You take a look at what the infrastructure bank's been able to accomplish since it's been set up, and the answer is really not all that much, which isn't surprising given the low cost of money right now. Frankly, a lot of the infrastructure projects that might otherwise have been picked up by the infrastructure bank are being picked up by private vendors because money's so cheap. And so you take a look at the possibility of P3 partnerships, those types of things. 15, 20 years ago, those would have been a huge issue. We would have heard a lot about that potential because, of course, with a P3 partnership, you can take advantage from the private sector of putting the money up front, and you get the benefits of a lower government borrowing rate. It's just not the case anymore. And so from the perspective of major infrastructure projects, private sector capital is just as cheap as government capital, and so they don't need the infrastructure bank anymore.
Okay, let's go on and talk about the NDP, the third major party in the House of Commons. And here is what the NDP has on offer. They are outlining their transportation priorities thus: affordable transit services for rural areas, rail investments, including restarting the Ontario Northlander train and bringing back the Algoma passenger train service between the Sault and Hearst, and creating a Northern Infrastructure Fund to fast-track investment and improve roads. So let's just go through some of those if we can. Bringing back the Ontario Northlander and, restarting the Northlander and bringing back the Algoma passenger train service between Sault and Hearst. That would be very expensive, and I wonder whether people in the North think that that's possible to do.
Well, it was one of the promises of the Tory government when they were running for election here provincially. So if the NDP get elected federally, I guess we'll have a federal government and a provincial government both on side with the reintroduction of the Northlander. Certainly, from the perspective of when we were talking about taking it out, there was a lot of opposition to that in the North. A lot of people using it, a very reliable service. The challenge, of course, is the numbers never were going to be to a level that we're going to be able to have it fund itself. But the simple fact is, if you look at experience in mass transit systems, whether you're talking about in Toronto or other major cities, if memory serves, I can only think of one that ever made a profit, and that was in Seattle. The rest of them all operated at a loss, and so they require a subsidy. So from that perspective, it's really a political decision. Do you want the rail or do you not want the rail? The simple fact is, if you want mass transit in a region, as you described, which is so huge and so sparsely populated, it's going to have to be subsidized. So you either subsidize rail at this level, large buses at the next level down, or smaller buses at the level next to that, or you do what we're doing now, and you have sort of individual health grants, which allow people, theoretically anyway, to access health care by using their private vehicles.
Okay, let's put the Green platform up now. Here are the transportation policy priorities for the Greens in the North: expanding rural transportation links via rail, light rail and electric bus connections, a national transportation strategy with the goal of zero carbon for public ground transportation everywhere in Canada by the year 2040. What do you make of that, Charles?
So I think that there will be some people in Thunder Bay who'll be more than happy to talk about having Bombardier build all those electric buses for them. I think that's the challenge there is, again, if we're talking about redesigning our transportation grid and mass transit, you've got to decide about the level. My challenge when I hear the federal parties talking about rural issues and rural transportation is, I think that when they're picturing rural, they're thinking about the communities just outside of the GTA. They're thinking about communities that are in commuting distance of Winnipeg or Edmonton or Calgary or Vancouver. And frankly, that's not the rural reality in Northern Ontario. We're talking about, basically from Kenora to Thunder Bay, it's the distance from Ottawa to Toronto. And you're not driving it on a 6 or 8 lane highway. It's a 2-lane road that looks a lot more like your local street than it does any highway that anyone in Southern Ontario is familiar with. So when you talk about mass transit up here, it's not going to be as simple as those 20 or 25 words in the platform make it sound.
Well, we've got a map that indicates that. Of course, if you live south of the French River, you've got a lot of transportation options when it comes to rail. But here's what it looks like in Northern Ontario. And again, I'll describe this for those listening on podcast in some detail. The brown dotted line in the middle, that was the Algoma Central Railway running from Sault Ste. Marie to Hearst. That was canceled 4 years ago. Via Rail, the long blue line, it travels northwest from Toronto, Sioux Lookout being one of the last northern stops before the Manitoba border. There is a relatively short stretch of the Ontario Northland Transportation Commission, and that's in the northeast, running from Cochrane to Moosonee. This is in the very far parts, northern parts of our province. As we can see from that map, or here from my description, Charles, there's not a lot up there. How much political commitment do you think is there from the political leaders of any of the parties to improve on this?
So my frank answer is not that much. I don't expect any of the provinces or any of the promises around rail infrastructure, expanding rail services, to actually take fruit or bear fruit. The simple fact is that we're talking about major investments for a small population base. Morally, I think it makes sense. From a tourism perspective, it makes sense. Socially, I think we have obligations. We've got communities up here with no water, totally unreliable on electricity. We're shipping in diesel fuel. You get a situation where, well, boil water orders are in place for 20 and 25 years, not because of a lack of willingness to make it happen, but because it's simply ridiculously expensive to put it in place. And then in terms of keeping it operational, it's very tough for the technician to get to these communities.
This is a rather big question to ask with just a minute and change left to go, but the balancing act in politics is tricky, particularly in Northern Ontario, where you've got Indigenous sensitivities that have to be taken into account. How do you balance the need on the one hand to build more transportation, to build roads, to build rail, with the very understandable need that Indigenous people feel in as much as their connection to the land would, for many, suggest no building here, please? How do you handle that?
So I think the answer to that is in one word: ownership. I think to the extent that we're going to see new infrastructure expanded in the north, we're going to see roads, rail, what have you, in terms of opening up the north, it has to be in the hands of the First Nations themselves. Not necessarily full, complete ownership, but we're not talking at least 50% plus one. They have to lead the charge on that thing. And in fact, we saw an example of that just last night here in Thunder Bay, where a community, Martin Falls, had the first public session as part of their environmental assessment for a new permanent road to their community. And they're leading the process, first of its kind in Canada, with the First Nations leading an environmental assessment. I think that's the way forward.
We had the chief from Martin Falls on this program just a couple of weeks ago, so I know what you're talking about, and so do our viewers.
There you go.
I want to thank you, Charles, for coming on to TVO again tonight, and look forward to speaking to you again soon about issues in Northern Ontario. Thanks so much.
Always happy.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.